Hi, welcome to this first Facebook Live about the introductory talk for Holotropic Breathwork. There's a workshop that's going to happen next Saturday, November 25th, and it is, well, mandatory for people who will assist to Breathwork for the first time to usually take this. The fact that I'm doing this on Facebook means the platform is open for many other people who would like to hear about this information. It should take about an hour or so to cover most of the important features that need to be known in order to create the right understanding and the right setting to do breath work. Then after an hour we're going to be open to questions, so it's going to be able to chat and do some questions. If you are participating in the breathwork session that will happen on Saturday, you can still ask questions. We're going to have a reminder with all the most important information that we're going to give Saturday morning. So, well, let's start right away with the important question: what is holotropic breathwork? Well, first let's look at the word itself. So, holotropic breathwork is an invented word. First of all, it's holotropic. Comes from two Greek roots. Holo is means whole, totality, and tropane means moving towards. So holotropic means moving towards wholeness. And the breath work, well, is because it's work that's done with the breath. So the idea behind the holotropic breath work is to create a setting in which you work with your breath and you allow yourself to create a sense that will allow you to move towards wholeness. Now, what does that mean? Well, the idea is that basically our usual state of consciousness asks us to consider that we are things, a skin-encapsulated ego, things, separate objects. I'm separate from you, from this person, from that person, from this table, from this chair, from this computer. So we're all an objects in a world of objects. But in some other states of consciousness, we tend to have a softer version of our ego, a softer relationship with the world, where the borders, the boundaries are less clear, less obvious. And that's what it is. Move towards wholeness is you can consider yourself as part of the energy of the universe, part of the love of the universe, part of everything that is alive, part of everything that is male, that is female, that is biologic, that is, you can join the unity of all those consciousness and see yourself differently. So it helps you to think differently. So that's just one explanation of what holotropic breathwork is, of course. Now, the idea, where does it come from? Well, it starts from, it was created in the 70s and early 80s by Stan and Christina Grof. Stan Grof was a psychiatrist who grew up in what is today the Czech Republic. At the time it was called Czechoslovakia. It was a communist country, and Stan Grof was studying to be a psychiatrist there. And it was at that time, a few years earlier, Albert Hofmann had first synthesized LSD and then used it by accident in a famous experience where he went home after ingesting accidentally LSD and had a very bizarre experience. And the idea was that Sandoz Laboratory, who owned the patent for LSD, wanted to know if it could be used for anything. So they were sending samples throughout different universities and psychiatry faculties and medical faculties to see if people could find a use for this substance. So Stan Grof was a student in Prague, and he volunteered himself to try an LSD session. And what happened is that the experience was extremely potent. He wrote about it in many of his books, and what came out of it is that he felt he did not have any idea how to explain his experience. So he said, well, there's certainly something missing in my knowledge, in our knowledge, if I cannot even start to explain what has happened to me under this substance. So that's when he started to take interest in the substance. He started to study it. He did a lot of psychotherapeutic sessions. He did a lot of work with it. He's probably one of the most serious and thorough worker to have really studied scientifically the effects of LSD on human beings and how it can be used to help people. Of course, throughout this, he took interest in the concept of non-ordinary states of consciousness. Because LSD creates a non-ordinary states of consciousness, but there are other methods that have been used historically. Of course, some chemical methods, different types of drugs, but also other methods that have been used throughout the world, throughout different cultures, different religions, different group of people who have used different methods to attain non-ordinary states of consciousness. Well, some of them use drumming, dancing, fasting, physical torture, of course, all the different types of drugs and mushrooms and substances. And some use vision quest, sensory deprivation. I mean, there are a lot of different ways that have been used throughout the history of the world to access different states of consciousness for whatever purpose. These methods of achieving other states of consciousness, it's not just to get high and find it cool. It really has a function, a very important function, to help people find their place in the tribe, in the group, to help them answer very important questions. There are some questions that in front of which our rationality leaves to be desired. What's the meaning of life? You can try to answer this one rationally forever and ever, and it will be an incomplete answer. And you can have the same question and those very difficult questions in other states of consciousness, and suddenly they're going to take a whole new meaning, and they're going to give you another way to relate to those questions. The idea, well, and that's my example, is, we have two eyes, and it allows us to see depth, to perceive reality in 3D. We have two ears, and it allows us to locate a sound when we hear it, because we have two ears. We can triangulate and see it. In the same way, having our regular state of consciousness and another state of consciousness, and often maybe looking the same object through two different states of consciousness, allows us to see it differently, to get a different quality of it. So it's extremely potent, this possibility of using altered state of consciousness, non-ordinary states of consciousness, to really try to start to think about the very difficult questions that we have to face during our lives. Of course, those non-ordinary states of consciousness are not very useful when you drive your car or when you're at work in a meeting, so they are limited. But for certain types of answers, they're really useful. This is, of course, during the 60s and early 70s, it became very, very difficult to work on substances, notably LSD. There were a lot of whatever happened at that time. LSD became a very polarized substance, so it became impossible, it became illegal to work with it. Still, Stan Grof felt that working with non-ordinary states of consciousness was very important. And what he did at that time was he decided with Christina, his wife at the time, to devise a method to attain those non-ordinary states of consciousness without using drugs. And that's where they came up with breathwork, holotropic breathwork. Now, I'm going to get back again to these non-ordinary states of consciousness. What do they do exactly? Well, one of the things that they do is they allow you, often, they have a healing quality to them, those states, often. Not only they allow you to understand, to think about things in a different light, they also allow to heal, to grow, to digest things that weren't able to be digested before. These non-ordinary states of consciousness that we've said earlier, they've been explored in many different ways by many different cultures. Now, the idea is also that a lot of those methods to attain them are very dangerous for the body. You know, when you use sweat lodges, it's very difficult. When you use different types of drugs, it can be very dangerous as well. When you fast, when I mean, a lot of those methods can be very dangerous. And the idea was to find a method that was extremely safe. And this was also very important in the context of creating the breathwork, to create a very, very safe method to attain those non-ordinary states of consciousness. So, now, what is exactly, what makes holotropic breathwork? Well, there are three main things that we are going to go through. The first thing, of course, is the breath. Well, the breath is at the same time absolutely fundamental, of course, because it's the name. Holotropic breathwork seems to imply that it's very important. And yet, it's not. It is extremely important, and yet it's not. I'm going to explain myself. First of all, I'm going to describe what it is. What it is a breath that is a little deeper, a little faster than usual, and as much as possible done in circular fashion, meaning without pause between inhale and exhale. So you just have to breathe a little faster, a little deeper than usual in a circular fashion. So just I'm already doing this breath. The idea is to sustain this breath for a long time to see what happens. And the idea is, of course, some people can breathe a lot faster than this, but when you read about holotropic breathwork, you're going to hear about hyperventilation, and it sounds very scary, like you're having a panic attack. And of course, you can breathe like that if you like. You're in control, and you can decide you can breathe like a mad person and just go all out, and you're in control of that. But, I mean, some people are a little scared, and they have perfect right to be scared of that. So the idea is you can just breathe a little deeper, a little faster than usual. And maintaining this is often enough. Now, what's the rationale behind it? There's all kinds of theories. Well, I was reading an article this week about the link between the ability to consciously change your breath and states of consciousness. What's strange is that we don't have to think to breathe. We just breathe naturally, and it's something that we do in our sleep. It just happens automatically. And yet, we have this ability to change it at will. So we can take control and then just leave it, and it's going to keep breathing on its own. So that's kind of an interesting feature. One of the images I like to use to show how the breath can be powerful enough to help you change your consciousness. It's to think about food. You know how the food you take can change your state of consciousness. Some people stop eating meat and stop eating sugar, stop eating all different substances, that they feel a different way of relating to the world and to themselves. And now food, as important as it is not even comparable to air, because we can eat and we can stop eating for a few days. We can stop drinking for a few days. But if you stop breathing for 2 minutes, you're going to have a very, very difficult time. And you're going to feel how important it is to breathe and how much Air is our basic, absolutely fundamental, most important food we have. So it's not far-fetched to think that just modifying our breath, our normal rhythm of breath, might have an implication on the whole chemistry of our body and the whole way we relate to everything. So, well, that's just to, I actually don't know how it works, but the thing is, when you experiment it, it actually works. So the idea is to breathe in the way that I explained. I'm going to explain it again Saturday and before the breath work. You breathe in a circular fashion, a little deeper, a little faster than usual. And you breathe until you're surprised, basically. The idea is to breathe until you're surprised. Surprised by what? Well, we're going to get into that later, but a lot of different experiences can happen in breathwork. But first, I just wanted to close this chapter about breath, the breath itself and how we breathe and the technique of it. It's not very technical, but the idea of just maintaining this breath is extremely powerful. So that's the first thing about holotropic breathwork is the breath. The second thing is the music. Typical holotropic breathwork session lasts about 2.5 to 3 hours, and it has a musical background. Now, the idea of the music is not there to direct your experience. It's not there to decide what you should be experiencing and this and that. But the importance of the music is, first of all, well, when we're breathing in a room with other people, let's imagine there's no music at all. What's going to happen is that every little noise in the room you're going to hear every little noise in the room. And we are not using any kind of drugs to do this. I mean, it's just breath. So the experience we have, it can be very interesting and very powerful, but still it's fragile. I mean, you open your eyes, you look around the room, you hear sounds, it can really take you out of the experience quite easily. So having sound allows you close your eyes, you're lying down, you breathe, and the music helps you to stay focused inwards and to, I mean, if somebody screams, there's a big noise in the room, you're going to hear it, but you're not going to hear every little thing that's happening in the room. It's quite helpful. Also, music gives a lot of energy. You know, you breathe and there's music. I mean, everybody's done sports or jogging or something, and with music you seem to have a lot more energy to it. So breathing is the same thing. It's not an exercise, but still it's an effort that you have to maintain. And the music starts with a lot of energy. It helps you to maintain a rhythm. You have a lot of drumming, a lot of powerful rhythm. Eventually, after an hour or so, it starts to have more emotion to it. And eventually it leads to possibly some kind of emotional release, and then it softly falls to music that turns into almost nothingness, and until it finishes with nature sounds. So basically the idea is just there to create a wave that you can follow and or not. I mean, you don't have to follow it. It's just there to help you in a way also time your experience. It kind of unconsciously creates a relationship with the idea that, well, I'm in the beginning, in the middle, I'm at the end, so you don't have to really think about it. You kind of know it intuitively. So, and the music also doesn't have any, we usually don't have any tracks in English or in French because we don't want the words to really distract us. We try not to have too much of other common languages, and we try to, but of course if you speak a language that is very rare and you happen to hear one song in a certain language, it might happen, but usually not the whole. You shouldn't be able to understand every song or every track used. Also, we don't use tracks that are too associated with something. For example, we're never going to use the Star Wars soundtrack because everybody's going to know what it's supposed to refer to. So that's basically that with the music. A lot of the times people have a quite interesting experience with the music. So first thing is breath, second thing music, and the third element that makes holotropic breathwork what it is the possibility to do body work. Okay. In order to get there, I'm going to have to do a little to take a step back and go into what can happen when you do holotropic breathwork. The idea is we say you breathe until you're surprised, breathe until something happens. What is this something that can happen? Of course, it can be any type of emotion. We don't have a favorite emotion. It can be joy, it can be laughter, it can be rage, it can be anger, it can be fear, it can be sadness. I mean, all those emotions can be a combination. All of those things can just manifest and just be there. The strategy in holotropic breathwork usually is to do more of it. It's very important to Stan Grof's thinking. The idea is that usually when we the idea that with the medical establishment works usually is by suppression of symptoms. We try to suppress symptoms, and I mean it's very good for many different conditions. But the idea here with holotropic breathwork is that some things aspire to manifest themselves, and we spend most of our times just suppressing it. So we usually, like for example, we're in a meeting somewhere, and if we feel sadness coming up, we're not going to express sadness during a meeting with people. We're going to keep it ourselves, and we're going to stop the breathing. Usually we're going to constrict the breathing to control an emotion. This is one of the things we do. We stop the breathing. Whereas breathing more it's like putting air on fire. It's going to manifest probably more. Well, the idea that Stan Grof had was that we shouldn't try to suppress symptoms, but to let them manifest, and even, why not, make them bigger, make them larger, just go really into it. So if the experience you're feeling is an emotion, the idea is not to suppress the emotion, but to really go into it and just go with it as much as you can. Now, it can be an emotion. It can be a memory. It can be a vision of colors and lights or images or a scene that you either know how to interpret or have no clue how to interpret. A scene that's completely alien, like a dream-like scene, or a scene that's a memory that's replayed in your mind. So it can be all of those things. Again, the idea is to just follow it and stay with it. Go with it as much as you can. Also, there can be many other types of experience. I mean, it can be a thought, a weird thought, and you can just go with it as well. But often what's going to happen is it can be a body sensation. It can be a tension, an intense pain, localized pain, numbing, you can really have some physical symptoms that manifest, because often the way our unconscious or our psyche wants to manifest starts with the body. But the thing is, how do you go deep into a sensation? How do you make it bigger, the sensation? How do you explore the sensation? For example, if I feel like I'm breathing and I feel like I have this pressure on my chest, the idea is not to say it's not okay. If that's what you're feeling, just go with it. Everything is okay. Everything should be just explored to see what it is. So let's say you're feeling this pressure on your chest. You say, okay, I'm feeling this pressure on my chest. How do I make it bigger? How do I go into it? Well, it's difficult to do that alone. But what you can do is you can ask a facilitator, me or the other staff, Philip or Isabel, that will be with me Saturday, or the sitter that will be with you, to help you with the sensation. How are they going to help you? Well, they're going to help you by offering resistance, like pressure here, and you are going to push against the pressure to make it bigger. And this is just an example. The idea, of course, if you're breathing for the first time, you're going to have a difficult idea of knowing what to do. And this is why the best thing to do is call us for help. If you're feeling stuck with something, you can always say, well, I need help with this, so you can call us. It's important to know that, because we will never, and it's very important, we will not intervene in your experience if you're not asking. You are the director of the thing. It's extremely important. If you're waiting for us to heal you, to cure you, to save you, you're going to be very, very, very disappointed. It's not going to happen. We cannot decide what's happening for somebody there. You know, I've seen people breathing, not moving a muscle for 3 hours, and when they share afterwards, they say, I had this epic adventure where I was being dismembered into the netherworld, and it was an epic adventure of torture and difficulty. Didn't move a muscle. Then you have this person who moves and who seems like they're going through hell and want to fight everybody, and they're moving and screaming, and they look like they're fighting demons. I don't know whether they look like they're really having a big struggle. And afterwards they say, well, I just had this little pain in my knee, so I felt like moving. So, you know, you cannot ever know what's going on into somebody's head. And the more you do this work, the more you do, you see that the more humble you get towards your ability to know what's going on in somebody else's mind. So I don't know, the other facilitators will not know what's happening in your mind. And that's why if you need help, you have to ask for it. If you need help, you need to ask for it. If you don't, well, we're not going to be able to intervene. So this is one thing that's very important. I know for my part, it took me a very long time before I was able to ask for help. But when I was finally able to do so, it was a huge victory for me to be able to ask for help finally and get some help. So I'm not going to deny anybody a victory of this type, that's for sure. Body work also, well, it's not just body work like something, it's not a massage, and it's not energetic work. It's really just helping you to work with whatever is there and to move the energy that you're feeling around in your body, or the tension or the pressure. Try to work with you to see how it's manifesting, what's happening. Sometimes nothing comes out of it, but sometimes it's quite impressive what can be released through this energetic work, through this work with the body. Also, the work with the body has another part as well. It's not just working with pressures and pains, and it's also just being there, present. A lot of the things that happen to us, you know, we remember somebody hit us in the face, or an accident we had, the things that have been done to us, we really remember. We have very clear memory of those things often. But what about the things that were needed but that were not given to us? Those, if the first are the sins of commission, what about the sins of omission? If your parents did not hold you, did not give you affection, this leaves a very, very serious mark on the psyche. It's quite impressive what can happen when you don't get your basic needs met. I mean, as human beings, we need to be touched, we need to be loved, we need to feel physical comfort from other beings, especially when we're young, from the people who protect us, who love us, it's very important to feel that. So when you're deprived of that, it's very, very difficult. It has the same impact as often as being abused. So sometimes if you're in a difficult place, just having somebody to ask, can I hold your hand, can be tremendously helpful to go through something difficult and really stay with something difficult. Or you can ask for a hug, or you can ask somebody to hold you while you're going through this very difficult time, this difficult experience. And often it's going to give you a lot of courage, a lot of strength, a lot of energy to go through this difficulty. So that was the first thing, breathing. Second is music, and the third thing is body work. That's basically what creates holotropic breathwork. There's another very important feature that we do, because I'm going to talk about the organization of the day. The day is very long. We have 2 breathwork sessions. We start in the morning. The first session starts, let's say, around 9:30, 10. It lasts 3 hours, so it finishes on 12:31. The second starts 2:30, finishes at 5:30. And then we have a sharing group, and it finishes at 7. So the day lasts at least 10 hours. It's very long. Some people say, why is it so long? Well, first of all, we are trying to go deep in the psyche, and the psyche is not something that you open like a cell phone, that you just go click and it's open and clack, close. Doesn't work like that. It needs time. It needs to be approached with care, with respect, with a feeling of safety, and it has to it has to exist in its own time. So trying to do very deep exploration in an hour and a half is I mean, if you can do it, fine, but it's very respectful and very safe to give it a lot of time. That's why we really have this big day. It's not just an inconvenience, it's a necessity to go deep and have the time to come back. So we have 2 breathwork sessions during the day. You're gonna be in 2 roles. The first, well, you're gonna be a breather and a sitter. So at the beginning of the day, we're gonna create teams. Don't worry if you don't already have a partner. We're gonna have a group and we're gonna divide teams, and everybody's gonna have a partner. Everybody's covered. No worry, everything's okay. So you're gonna decide when you have your partner who breathes first, who breathes in the morning, and who breathes in the afternoon. So the person who breathes. What about the person who sits? Because we pretty much saw what a person who breathes does. They lie there, they breathe, and they try to stay with the experience as much as they can. The person who sits, the idea is to be present, available, but not overbearing. It can be quite difficult to sit at first. It can be unsettling because you're sitting there and a lot of stuff can happen in the room, but you have to stay focused, not maniacally, but you have to stay focused on the person you're sitting for. The idea is that we don't want people to be left alone. We don't want to reinforce any form of abandonment issue. I mean, you can really experience abandonment if you go there. It's not going to make you never go there. But the idea is we don't feel the necessity to reinforce abandonment. And it helps to feel secure. Sometimes people say, well, I'm not going to be able to go into this if somebody's looking at me and somebody's watching me while I'm trying to go there. And it might be true for some people, but the majority of people, you realize that it creates safety. I mean, it's like when we dive in scuba diving, we dive in pairs for safety. And the same thing with breathwork, we dive in pairs. One's diving and the other is holding your string just to make sure that everything's okay and everything's there. Also, since the experience is very fragile, I mean, you open your eyes, you look around the room, and I mean, you're not on LSD, you're not on ayahuasca, you're not on any type of substance, you're not completely far out. You just open your eyes and you're going to be basically in your everyday awareness. Well, partly. And the thing is that, so if you need a Kleenex or if you need a drink of water and you need to look around the room and, identify your bottle, open your bottle, drink it, you're really, really losing a lot of the energy you gathered to get into this state of consciousness. Whereas if you're breathing and you just do a gesture saying, give me something to drink. So you don't have to navigate the room. You don't have to use your rational mind. You don't have to look what's happening anywhere in the room. You just have to say, I need a drink. And so you drink and it's done. So basically the main work of the sitter is to protect the space around the breather, make sure the breather doesn't leave the space and nobody enters this space. It's to give water and give Kleenex and make sure to come and get the facilitator if need be. That's the main job. But of course, sometimes, depending on the breather, they're going to require more or less of you. One of the difficult things that can happen is if nothing happens, and so you can feel it can become boring to be sitting there for 3 hours and you have nothing to do, but you have to be there and present. Well, as much as it's important when you're breathing, you're there for yourself. When you're sitting, you're not there for yourself, you're there for somebody else. So it creates a balance during the day. You have 3 hours where you're totally for me, my stuff and my experience, and 3 hours where you're there for somebody else. It's quite interesting, the experience. It's really well balanced. And the other thing as well is, so if you're feeling bored, you're allowed, but stay bored and experience boredom while being present and available for the person. It's quite possible to do that. Often it's going to be the reverse. Not exactly the reverse, but you're going to see the person who seems to be experiencing a difficult time crying, or looks angry or scared, or looking like they're having a very difficult time, and they're not asking you to do anything, so you feel like you're useless, you're not helping. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to be in front of somebody who looks like they're suffering and not do anything. We feel like we're cruel of letting them down. But the idea is, if the breather does not ask your help, you just have to stay present and wait. Can be very difficult. I've seen some people struggle a lot with this thing. What I usually say is, if you're feeling triggered by what's happening there, just remember that nobody is causing anything in the moment. If the person is experiencing something, they're experiencing just, in fact, the movement of this energy through the body. It's coming from somewhere else, from another time. It's not being created here and now. So in the end, it's very positive that this person experiences this apparent difficulty. It's releasing. So at one point you become, I can tell you, whenever I hear people manifesting any type of anything, I'm just very happy for them. And if it gives you comfort, it can help you to go through this difficult time and accept that somebody doesn't look like they're in a pleasant place, but they're in a very useful, necessary place to be. So another thing I want to cover, we have a contract about what we can and cannot do, but that I'm going to do on the Saturday morning. It's because it's not very long, and I just want to make sure that we cover this at that time. I'm going to repeat a few things about breathing, and the main instructions are going to be repeated, don't worry. One of the things I want to cover is what are we doing exactly when we're doing breath work? Well, the idea, what we like to say, is that we are contacting something called the inner healer. Wow, now that looks bizarre. The idea is that we are not saying what the inner healer is. We don't have any belief. Holotropic breathwork is not a religion, is not a thought system. It's really just a way to hold space and to allow people to explore something. When we say we contact the inner healer, it's an image that says whenever we go into non-ordinary states of consciousness and we create space for that, we allow ourselves to new experiences, to something, to touch the unknown, and to probably grow, heal. And we use the image of the inner healer. The idea is that there seems to be a force that pushes us to heal, to grow, to understand, to be more conscious, name it however you like. Our life seems to push us sometimes in a certain direction. And for example, let's say if you get a cut, your body is going to start its healing process without you being aware of it. It's just going to start to repair itself, and the process is automatic. And it's not that far-fetched to imagine that there could be a psychic or psychological equivalence of a process that tries to heal the psyche. And often by just giving it space to manifest, we are already starting this process. Just by taking the time and giving it space to manifest, the process is already starting. So this is the thing we believe in holotropic breathwork, that's what the inner healer is. It's a force that pushes us in the direction of growth, healing, understanding. Now, when we say we don't believe in anything, is that this force, you're completely free to decide what it is. So some people will say it's a psychological component. Other will say it's a guardian angel, it's archetypes, it's divinities, it's primordial forces. Whatever it is for you, you're free to decide whatever it is. The idea is that there is such a force, and it's at least useful to use that as what I call a useful hypothesis. If you're a very skeptical nature, the idea is not to believe in anything, but just for the day, the duration of the holotropic breathwork session, try to entertain the hypothesis that there is such a force that is working, that's trying to help you. Just for a day, you try to entertain this possibility, and the day after, you can stop believing it if you like. It's just a very useful hypothesis. Now, I wanted to go a little deeper into something that's very important. It's the types of experience that can happen during breathwork. There are many experiences. Of course, we tend to talk more about the difficult experience, because the easy or the pleasant experience, they don't need explanation, they're kind of self-explanatory. If you have an encounter with a divinity that tells you how awesome you are, well, it's not going to be very difficult to integrate that experience. If you have a fantastic experience of great colors, or feeling of love, gratitude, of oneness with everything, I mean, you don't need to be, it's rather easy to go through that experience alone, or to integrate it and understand it and give it meaning. But what about difficult experiences? It's not that they're more important, not at all. I mean, if you have a great experience, I'm really rooting for you. I would be happy if you had a great experience, of course. But at a certain point doing holotropic breathwork, you relativize what is a great experience. A great experience is an experience where you learn a lot, and often those experiences can be very, very painful, but very useful. So I'm going to talk about those difficult experiences because they're more difficult to accept. Not because they're more important, but because they're harder to accept. So, for example, if you have a very strong emotion, it can be anger, it can be fear, it can be sadness, and it's difficult, but it's kind of easy to go with it because we understand what it is. So we know what it is to go with this emotion and to let it flow. What about the more difficult emotion where your feeling is that you're not doing this right, that it's not working for you, that you're somehow deficient where every other people there are able to go to the state and you can't? What if you experience powerlessness, frustration, hopelessness, despair? Those are very difficult emotions to experience during breathwork. And often what's going to happen is that they're so difficult to experience that we're going to tend to project them on a situation. We're going to say, I'm powerless, but this is because of this. I don't like the music, or somebody just started screaming a second ago, or this or that, or this happened. And you have a hard time owning the fact that you have a right to feel powerless or frustrated or despair. I mean, it's not pleasant, but it can also be allowed to manifest, and it's okay to give it a space for it to manifest. And sometimes it's extremely difficult to accept. And a lot of people will really go out of their way to project this on the situation and excuse themselves on the situation. Well, I'm sorry, but this thing, in the middle of breathwork, they're going to say to me, it's not working at all. So what's not working? Well, nothing's happening. And well, how do you feel about it? Well, I'm a little pissed off. Okay, so your experience is not that it's not working, it's that you're experiencing being pissed off. And it's very difficult to accept. But the idea is that your consciousness, you can always take a step back on your state and observe yourself. If you're experiencing something difficult and you have absolutely no reaction to it, well, you're a very, very advanced being, because most of us are going to have very huge reaction to it. So those are the kinds of experience that can be very difficult. And I'm going to go with an image on Saturday for the experience. I'm going to go with the experience of what's being horizontal and vertical. It's just going to be a very interesting trick and little exercise to learn to be present to what's there and try not to judge it and decide what's good and what's bad. The ideal state of mind for breath work is to arrive with a virgin state of mind where you don't have preferences, when you just go with what's there and you let it happen and manifest. Other difficult experiences are experiences that are completely weird or random, and we don't even have words to start describing them. Well, the thing is, don't be in a rush to explain them. Give them space. I mean, if you don't believe in reincarnation and you're experiencing being Jesus Christ, well, don't try to understand it or explain or say it makes sense or don't. Just experience that. Let it be the experience. Let it speak. Eventually it will make sense or not. It will be time later to explain, to integrate this experience. But while it's happening, try to not judge it and just let it manifest. go with whatever's there. Try not to have a preference for what's happening. Very difficult, but that's why it's called breath work. There's a lot of work involved in there. We've talked about, there's another thing I'd like to talk about because it really helps to contextualize the experience. And this is going to take me the last 15 minutes. It's 8:15. I'm going to take 15 minutes on that, and then we're going to close this, and I'm going to open the floor to questions and try to answer them. So, when Stan Grof first did LSD and then his work on LSD, he realized that there was a problem with our understanding of what the psyche was and what it contained, what it could do. And he started to devise, and he came up with what he calls a new map of the psyche. And it's a very interesting metaphor, the map of the psyche. And this map is, in fact, kind of three maps superimposed on each other in a way. The map talks about three realms of the psyche. So the first realm of the psyche is something we really know about. It's what psychology and psychiatry recognize. It's called the biographical realm. This biographical contains everything that happens to us. It's extremely important. It talks about how we were raised. Were we rich, poor, were we bullied or not? Are we a guy, a girl? Did we have brothers, sisters? Did we have our parents? Did we lose them? Were we sick or not? I mean, all those things are tremendously important under personality. And of course, the idea is not to negate the importance of this. It is important. It's fundamental. And maybe a lot of your experience is going to have to do with this material. That's of course. But I want to emphasize on the two other domains because they're constantly underemphasized, not to say completely neglected. So if the first domain is the biographical, whatever happens to you, the second realm is the perinatal. Now, this is probably the most shocking part of what I'm going to say today. A lot of people get shocked by this. I know I was at first. The perinatal concerns the experience that happened to us between conception and especially culminating around birth itself, and then the first few days, maybe weeks after birth. So that's the perinatal. Now, the general understanding for the last few centuries and decades, and most people will tell you that a baby doesn't remember anything. And you said, do you remember your birth? No, I don't remember my birth. I don't remember my birth like I remember what I ate yesterday or the movie I saw last week. But the memory of birth is at the same time more confusing and infinitely more powerful. I'm going to try to give you a picture of how it can manifest, but when you start realizing that, it's awe-inspiring. First of all, let's imagine the baby is the most fragile thing we are, and the birth is the most significant transformational event we will ever experience. And we experience this most powerful, I mean, compared to that, I mean, being born is being transformed from a water creature to something that breathes air. It's having your whole universe completely transformed and shattered at a time where you have no experience, no protection, nothing. It cannot be overly emphasized how traumatic birth, even in the best of cases, it's our original initiation right to be born. And it leaves a mark. It's our first experience. It's going to condition every other experience we have afterwards. Now, to help start to understand the quality of this experience of birth and how it can manifest in life, Stan Grof divided the experience into the four great qualities of the experience, which he called the perinatal matrices, 1 through 4. So I'm going to tell you the ideal story of birth, and then we're going to see what each matrix looks like. So the birth starts, well, your consciousness seems to rise out of nothingness, and you are in your mother's womb, and you're cared for, you're fed, You're protected, you hear her voice, you're loved. I'm talking about the ideal case, the perfect birth, the perfect pregnancy and birth. So you're there and you're just floating into happiness and paradise where everything is going absolutely perfectly well. That's the oceanic matrix. If you feel well in the ocean, in water, and you feel incredibly fantastic, well, you probably have a good first matrix imprint somewhere. It's really a reminder of this. Then the labor starts, but the cervix is not yet open, so this paradise turns to hell. This fantastic place that was caring for you, that was your whole universe and was absolutely perfect place for you, is now crushing you. 40 pounds of pressure per square inch. That's a lot of pressure. You do that to a baby and they're going to put you in jail. But that's how the body of the mother works to try and turn the baby in the best position for birth. Of course, the baby cannot understand this, and the only thing it understands is that the universe is suddenly crushing it, trying to destroy it. So it's really from heaven to hell. The experience of being buried alive, hopelessness, and you're completely powerless. You cannot move, you can't do anything, you cannot understand. You're just in a panic state where nothing is possible. And I'm talking still about the ideal and the perfect birth, so you can imagine. Then the cervix opens and the work towards, so that was the second matrix. The first part is oceanic, the second part is feeling stuck. The third part is movement towards the exit. But this movement happens, of course, we all know what the mother does. We see the birth with push and all this violence, this biological fury that happens during birth. And all those bodily fluids, blood and feces and urine, I mean, everything it's just absolutely brutal. And if it's brutal for the mother, it's also at least as brutal for the baby. But at least in this place, there's the feeling of a certain struggle, there's a certain direction, because there's a push towards something that's happening. So the despair, now it's difficult, it's another type of hell, a hell that burns, that crushes, that skins you alive, that it's very difficult, but it's a fight, so you get the feeling that there's something you can do about it. And then the fourth quality is the moment of liberation, when you're finally free. Wow. But this freedom, this ultimate achievement arrives at the cost of being completely lost in a new universe. You don't know anything. You had no space, you had no light, almost just very cushioned sounds, and now you're hearing everything. The light is crushing your eyes, just you're cold, the distance is huge, the universe seems like you're lost into an infinite space. It is very, very disorienting. And now in this ideal birth, this big trauma that just happened, this transformation that resembles nothing else that happens in our lives, well, if you're lucky enough to be put on your mother, which is at least partly conscious and they're enough to receive you with love, and this trauma just gets. But if you don't, if you're premature and you're sent into an incubator, if the mother has to be operated on because there were complications, I mean, there's so many things that can happen, those imprints can take a whole new dimension. And you can think about all those stages of birth and see everything that can go wrong, or that can be more difficult in those stages. The first stage of birth, what if your mother is a drug addict? What if if she's a victim of physical abuse? What if she lives in a country at war? I mean, all those things are going to create a lot more difficult experience in the womb. What if she's sick? Well, the second matrix is always a nightmare in almost every situation, but sometimes it can last a few minutes, and sometimes it will last hours and hours. So that's going to be a different imprint depending on how long you stay there and how long you perceive to have stayed there. Third matrix can be very different for a lot of people. Some people don't go through it because what if you have a C-section and you're taken out before that moment? Some people experience this as a sense of invulnerability, that somebody's always going to be there, that there's a higher power just over them. But other people experience that as not being allowed to go through the process they should have gone through. So there's the same birth can have very different impacts on the same person, but it will almost most definitely have an impact. And we underemphasize this so much because, in a way, I think we are terrorized of going back to this initial trauma, because it is that, a trauma. We do not want to go there. We never want to go there because we are terrorized of going back to birth. And we are so terrorized that we negated the consciousness of the baby for the longest time, which means what? That even until recently, young babies were operated on without any form of anesthesia. Without any form of anesthesia. So baby 1 week old were operated on and opened with a knife without any form of anesthesia. Because we think it's a creature that doesn't remember anything. I mean, it's barbaric. In a few years, in a few decades, it's going to be considered one of the worst treatments of humans ever in the history of the world, to operate on babies without any form of... well, in the 60s and 70s, they were using curare, which is just something that paralyzes the baby, for it not to move and not to manifest any discomfort while they were operating it. It's maybe not strange that a lot of people felt they were abducted by aliens and operated on at that time. It might be a way to kind of understand this experience. Once you start taking interest in your birth, and if you have the chance to know a little bit about your birth, you might be able to start to figure out how certain patterns influence your life and how they relate to you. I have a whole talk, a 3-hour talk about just the perinatal matrices. So eventually I'm going to give it, not on Facebook Live, but I cannot go into it in depth as much as I like. But you get the idea that sometimes the impression we get, you're breathing and you're feeling stuck, or you're feeling frustrated, or you're feeling those elations or free. They are just memories of birth that happen in ways or others. And they just manifest because you're allowing your psyche to open up. And just allowing it to open up will sometimes make those things happen. So the first domain of the psyche is the biographical. The second domain of the psyche is the perinatal. And the third domain is what's called the transpersonal. The idea is that if there's a connection, a biological connection to the first two realms, the biographical and the perinatal, we're there physically. Those other experiences don't require us to be there, have a physical connection to it. So if people have experience of near-death experiences, or being abducted by aliens, or having past lives, or entering shamanic death, or mystical realms, or all those things happen, and we don't know what they're for, and it's hard to explain them, but eventually it's the job of the individual to give it meaning. And the idea in Holotropic Breathwork is we don't judge it, you just experience it, and eventually you'll be able to explain it. And whatever doesn't fit into the first categories, let's just put it in the transpersonal and say sometimes maybe you might experience something that doesn't belong to you. Maybe you're going to experience somebody else's pain, or somebody else's sadness, or somebody else's memories. Why not? The psyche is a very, very, very mysterious place, and we have to be open up to the possibility that consciousness is something infinitely weirder than we think. So basically, that's the presentation. So I'm gonna be open to questions if you have some. So I'm gonna try to open Facebook and read them. So if you have specific questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. Okay, well, if you are to assist in the breathwork on Saturday. And if you have other questions, things that you're not sure, you can always ask them. We're going to have a small period where we can address. We try not to talk too much on Saturday morning because it's already a long day, and we try not to go too deep into explanations and rational explanations. But if you have something that you really feel the need to be answered, well, you can always write to me. If it's pressing that you answer it before the breathwork, you can ask it on a Saturday morning, and we'll address it, address your question, and try to answer as best we can. So thanks for watching, thanks for being there, and I hope to see you Saturday, and I'm very eager to get on with this work with you. So have a good night.